Hi Suman, hi Sandri.
Good evening. Hi, Divya.
How are you guys doing?
Yeah, good.
Excellent.
Just Suman and I were chatting about, a lot of good comments that came from the previous episode. So that's always really nice. A lot of learning.
Lovely.
Hi
Awesome.
Divya, hi Saundari.
Hi, Suman.
Sorry, I was not able to hear anything. Then I realized I was on mute. I mean, my volume was low.
Ah,
Good to be back.
yeah. Yeah, can hear you now.
Suman, do you want to?
Yeah, let's do that. So it's great to have Saundari back with us to pick up where we left last week on taking ownership. Um, so, quickly to recap, we started talking about um, it being a mindset, right? Ownership being a mindset. And don't we all wish that people took more ownership? A project manager wishes the team members took ownership. A leader of an organization expects the employees to take ownership. I think even parents, we want our children to take ownership. So I think the world would be a much better place if people just started taking more ownership.
Yeah, absolutely. Do you want? Shall I jump in, Suman?
Please do.
So I absolutely agree. And, last week, Saundari talked about the fact that, you need a few ingredients for that to come together, right? She talked about accountability, and Saundari, you also talked about authority, right? So I've been thinking about it, and, as much as it is a mindset that needs to be cultivated in the company, I keep coming back to the fact that employees need to be empowered, right, to cultivate that ownership mindset, right? Now, what does it look like when there is no ownership mindset, right? And I'd like to kind of touch upon these three, at least three things that occur to me. I'd love to hear more what it looks like when there is no ownership mindset within the company, and employees aren't empowered, right? One, everybody knows that something is going wrong, but everybody feels like it's not their piece, right? Because it's not something that falls under their authority or jurisdiction, and therefore, the company continues to fall, right? Two is, just the lack of motivation, because without empowerment to go strategic, to kind of go and build something that is not just in your purview, I think without that there is a lack of motivation generally. And the third thing that kind of is is just that if everybody is doing their own piece, there is that a very disjointed end experience, right? If it's a product, or if it's a very disjointed end culture, right? If it's a company. So I think those are all dangers of employees not being empowered to have the mindset of ownership. And on that note, I wanted to check with both of you how you therefore build that, right? How does a company go about building that culture or mindset of ownership?
Great. So I think there are quite a few some of the things that you talked about kind of answers the question also. Like you talked of lack of motivation. That can also happen because there is no ownership, right? It feels disjointed because people are working in isolation, because there is no ownership. And the empowerment is, of course, a very powerful one. So maybe what I can do is quickly delve into, how to make it happen at a broad level, which is what we started doing last time, and then get into the specifics. Would that work?
Perfect.
Great. So I talked about it briefly last time. So if I have to kind of put together, I was also thinking maybe we can put together in two buckets. So one is about the mindset, and I always feel very strongly about the mindset. So if I have to put it down in simple words, what are the kind of mindsets, right? So one is think like an owner. In the situation that I'm in, what would the owner think, feel, or do? That's a think like an owner. The next is think end to end, right? And I think to your point of being disjointed is linked to this. So if I'm in production, not look at it only from a production lens, or if I'm from quality, not just from a quality lens, but about the customer experience, the product or service in its entirety. You're thinking end to end. When you're thinking end to end, it's not disjointed anymore. The other one is think what, not who, right? Focus on what is wrong, which is about fact finding, versus focus on who is wrong, which is fault finding. And we see this often. It creates a blame culture in an organization, and the blame culture is the complete antithesis of an ownership culture, right? So those are at a high level what it is, what it really takes to have a mindset of ownership. Now, delving into what organizations can do about it, couple of things, and I think I talked a bit about deciders and implementers need to be closer, because typically in large organizations there are many levels separating them. So one way is to reduce the hierarchy, flatten the org structure, which a lot of companies are trying to do now. And the other thing which a lot of large companies do is to create small teams which create an end-to-end accountability. It is more customer focused. Now, in an organization, people need to grow, not just in designations, but grow in the way they think and act, open their minds, be open to new ideas. These are all expectations, right? Understand others' perspectives, start looking at the big picture, break away from siloed thinking. Now, how do you do that? Uh, one of the ways is to create opportunities for people. So how do companies do that? So there are few things that companies can do, and they often do those. One is about rotating people. So we've seen management trainees. When we also joined, we went through several departments. It basically gives you a bird's eye view of how the whole thing operates. At a more senior level, you see folks who are being groomed for senior positions are rotated in different roles, often in different countries, geographies, just so that they have a more all-rounded view. Now, it can also be dynamic in nature. It need not be static. So let's say once a finance guy has done the rounds, he or she is typically involved only in that area. But how about making him sit on a sales call? Not just listening in, but taking accountability for results or action items. For that matter, why not have a production guy handle support tickets, right? So you can do these, have different people do different roles, and companies which do that proactively see tremendous benefits in creating an empathetic and inclusive culture. And coming to culture, I think it's also imperative on companies that they create trust in the workplace, also a safe space for people to speak up. Right? Trusting people is, I think, very important. Trust them to do what is right and not micromanage. And that's, again, a big shift, because often we end up micromanaging. That's often what we see in organizations. And micromanaging of all things actually greatly reduces ownership. And in doing all of that, they kind of bring the whole self to work. So, Saundari, maybe it will be good to hear your views on getting the whole self to work. Why do you think that's important? And in the process, also talk about maybe that will segue into the questions that Divya posed initially. Over to you.
Yeah. Yeah, lovely. I mean, so many thought sparks from what both of you said. I want to thank everyone who reached out actually from the previous episode and shared their thoughts as well. Clearly shows that this topic is very close to many hearts. And before I share my thoughts on the question you asked, Suman, if I may add, regarding rotation and opportunities, and I've seen this for myself again, like you said, in my Unilever days, when I joined as a management trainee, I went through so many roles in short stints across the organization, and irrespective of which job function that you finally end up working, these stints give you a whole perspective and how many of the individual parts make the whole. So I had worked in the factory, in oil buying, in tea tasting, packaging, animal feeds before my final assignment as a management accountant. And not only was it useful for me, I think I also connected much better to the organizational why. And to me, the magic happens when leaders also do this. And I've seen it in some organizations. Andy Billings, who's a vice president of profitable creativity at Electronic Arts, he talks about the importance of actually getting out from behind your desk and seeing what really happens in the business. And during Andy's early days at EA, he worked as a consultant, and one of his clients was Monty, a very senior experienced VP. And it's a tech industry, right? A lot of people wear jeans and t-shirt and come to work. Monty stood out. He was like very distinguished. And one day when Andy went to visit Monty at his office, he found it empty, totally empty. And like he went to the office next to Monty's and he found the admin assistant and he said, "Where's Monty?" And the admin guy looked at him and took him to a totally different part of the studio where things like broken up computer parts were scattered and all that. And there in a humble engineering cubicle, Monty was sitting. And he asked him, "What are you doing here?" And he said, "I have all the materials that I ever want in my two cardboard boxes," pointing to two beaten up boxes in the corner of the room. And there was a picture of Monty's family on his desk next to his laptop. And he said, "Every month or so, I move to a different location." And it scares the hell out of people that he goes and sit next to. But he gives him a great feel of how the studio is working, how the game is doing, what people feel, and he can anticipate the future. So really the magic happens when everybody are able to do that in the organization. Then you start taking ownership for the enterprise itself as a whole. Now, back to your question on ownership and the whole self, ownership mindset, you talked about it, taking responsibility for outcomes. And Divya also mentioned about being empowered to take those decisions which will lead to those outcomes. And employees really need to feel secure to be creative and work in a way that's not just transactional, but with intent and purpose and full engagement. And when we were talking earlier, so when you mentioned about the Gallup survey, and I think the latest survey talks about 20% of the people only being emotionally invested in their job, which means 80% aren't. And that, if you have to look at it in terms of a number, that's actually 4.5 India's worth of disengaged people in the world. That's a huge number.
Yeah, isn't that scary?
Yeah.
It
And
is.
it's a staggering number, absolutely. So why isn't work what it should be? And why are people, when they're coming to work on the days when they used to get ready and go to work, or even when going to sit behind a desk now, you're just bringing a metaverse avatar of you or a Bitmoji avatar of you. You're not like bringing your whole self. And I think part of it, and I'm obsessed about it, even when I worked as an employee, as a manager, as a team leader, as a cluster head, what drives people, what brings them to life, what lights that fire in their belly. And I think of this even more now when I'm consulting with organizations, because sometimes you find some of these people who are like flying below the radar, very good people, uncommitted, quiet in their meetings and all that. And then you go in the evening and look at their Facebook feed or Insta stories and you think, "Oh my God, is this the same person?" So what would it be like? Yeah, right? I mean, it's like such a big disconnect, right? So you want to know what, we know this. We talk about, that's also partly because we talk about how do we make things efficient? How do we make things productive? But we don't probably ask the right questions and then listen. We don't talk about people and what is it about making meaning. What if work is going to be different? What if you can turn on your human emotions at work? And there are a lot of organizations who are doing this right. I'll just share a quick example. There's an organization called Next Jump. It's a e-commerce business. The company handles loyalty programs for Dell, Intel, Hilton Hotel, and all that. And they have this absolutely revolutionary work culture that values self-development above everything else. And I think they even featured in Harvard Review they follow something called as a deliberately developmental organization. And they put so much emphasis on helping employees learn and grow as humans, they put emphasis on revenue goal as well. So it's a bit of both, so it is really looking at how do you, as an organization, enable the workplace being more human. Imagine being in that kind of a team where the leader places trust and faith. You would follow them. You would have that they have your back. And the corollary of it, which Divya alluded to as well, is when people don't have that opportunity to be vulnerable or bring their full self at work, it's often harder to build trust on that team. Sharing your passions and aspirations outside your workplace really encourages people also to be open. And, having those difficult conversations with people then creates a more expansive culture. And by showing others what inspires you, motivates you, challenges you, you create that environment of belonging and trust. And that's true even in a digital or hybrid world. I'll just just stop there for now. And I can see some chat messages as well, which I probably missed reading.
Yeah, so Divya, question to you. I hope that answers your question. I would also like to kind of just put out my thoughts about empowerment, right? We hear that word often. But before I do that, let me hear from you. Does that kind of uh, resonate?
It absolutely does, and I think both, Suman, from what you're saying, and Sandri, from what you're saying, two things that are really very very loud for me right now are the fact that do not micromanage as a leader, right? It is the opposite of kind of empowering your or delegating decisions down the ladder, right? As much as possible, delegate decision making down the ladder, which is also synonymous with building trust, like you're saying, right, Soundri, and giving them the authority and empowerment to do so. I think those are really big takeaways for leadership and employees alike, right? I think thanks a lot. It does answer my question.
Yeah, and what you just mentioned is essentially what I was also trying to chip in with, which is about empowering. And I think,
Suman, did we lose Suman, Sandri?
Yeah. Yeah, I can't
can you
hear
hear
him
me? Hear me
now.
now?
Yes, no,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, now it's okay, Suman.
So I think what I was trying to say is what I was trying to say earlier about empowering is exactly on those lines, that accountability and authority must go hand in hand. If I don't have authority, then there's no question of me taking accountability. Then work becomes transactional, people disengage, all those kind of things happen. Work becomes there's no motivation. So empowerment, if you think about it, is how we pass on accountability. Yeah? When accountability is passed on, you're allowing the person to take a decision, make mistakes, learn from that. Then the person feels empowered, and it has aspects of delegation, autonomy, decision making, all of those things. In fact, I get reminded of a cartoon I saw where this manager is telling his team member, "Hey, I would like you to be more self-reliant, show more initiative, and take ownership, but check with me first." Okay, and I think that is what often happens, right? I mean, and the moment that person feels that he or she is being micromanaged, ownership doesn't happen.
I think it's very powerful. The accountability piece, give authority piece. You can't take something which is not there. So ownership, you can take only when the environment is set right for that. And I think having leaders also being that bit vulnerable really helped, especially during the pandemic, right? I'm not alone in trying to keep it all together. I understand where you are. I'm in that same boat. So sharing some kind of a pandemic log, talking about what's happening in their life and work, that creates also the right messaging for the employees also to come out and say, yeah, we understand, and we are all in it together. Let's do this together. And to that extent, Suman, you talked about ownership mentality. I was chatting with this other friend of mine, and he said a really nice thing, which I thought was ownership mentality is an individual and a collective feeling. It is not just that one person or somebody doing everything. It is actually a collective feeling for the team organization.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the moment it becomes collective, that's what we refer to as culture, isn't it? Culture is collective, how the organization behaves overall.
Totally.
And I'd like to add to this, right? I think let's talk about what, when things go bad, right? So even let's say within a culture or mindset of ownership, let's say you do delegate your decisions as a leader, and something goes wrong. I think, enabling and creating that safe space is also, it means that as a leader, you step up and take, you have the employees back, right? Even if they are making a decision that went wrong, I think, just the fact that it is a collective acceptance of the outcome rather than, like you said, Suman, earlier, it that should not be a blame game, right? Even internally, I think that safe space creation is also super, super important. But
Yeah, maybe I can narrate a story about what happens when there's a lack of ownership. Should
yes,
I do
please,
that?
that would be.
Yes, please.
So the story goes like this: that on April 26, 1986, that was quite some time back, operators at Chernobyl, they objected to performing a particular test, saying conditions were not right. But their manager insisted, who was more concerned with his own ambitions, didn't really care about anything else, including safety. And what happened because of that, it triggered a total meltdown of the reactor core. And we all know about the Chernobyl disaster, right? Somebody described it as airline pilots experimenting with the engines in flight. It was that risky. The bottom line is this disaster stemmed from the fact that nobody felt a sense of ownership. And really, it's a powerful reminder of how bad things can get when those who are performing the work have no authority, and those who are in charge don't hold themselves accountable. And I think we've seen enough examples worldwide. I'm sure there's a whole bunch of those examples right here in India as well. And this is so common. And I think now companies are realizing, and there is, we are trying to uh, make people accountable. But it's a hard task. It's not one of those things which you tell people or command people. It's an ownership, and it takes time to build.
No, absolutely. And I think even in the digital world now, right? How do you show up as human? And I want to think about a more positive thing on, as leaders, like, we heard of a lot of people doing these video interviews and all that, or then you see candidates are coming in distracted. Slightly digress example, but this is like Carly Bush, who is VP of HR services at Global Medical Research. She was interviewing this candidate, and the candidate was distracted by her toddler crawling all over her, under her chair, and everything else. And Kali just took that moment to tell her, take care of your child. And even if you have to finish the interview with the kid in the lap, it's okay, go ahead and do it. And, it made such a big difference to that person who was being interviewed. And it just gave her that courage, and it gave her the freedom as, somebody attending an interview, looking for a job, but still being able to do it where you are, as you are. And Carly says that I could see the relief in her face. And I want to share that it's important to recognize the struggles that people are facing, and we need to be accommodating. And this kind of small kindness makes a difference to the world. So, how can you take even ownership of these kind of small changes when you wanted to be purposeful, personal, build that transparency, and show up as human? And then you lead others to do that too.
Very well said. Yeah, we all need to show up as human, and that's a struggle. And I think the research also shows that once we are stressed, which is quite often, in fact, now, uh, what immediately goes out the window is empathy, compassion, and kindness. So yeah, it's an uphill task.
I think there was this other thing that I was reading, which is very interesting to this, which is clear communication, right? A lot of the times as leaders, you're not, kind of putting forward what you know to the team and to the employees. And in this concept of cognitive apprenticeship, which is think through what you're doing and talk through what you're doing, is also very, very important to kind of build clear lines of transparent communication, right? But just that limited thought before I hand.
No, no, I think you bring a very good point. Clear communication is also absolutely important. And if you don't do that, if there's ambiguity, again, research has shown that that actually activates the threat response in the brain, right? So that takes away ownership. So even if, let's say, there's a big change initiative going on, even if you don't know uh, what the outcome is, or you don't know the answer to the question, even if as a leader, even if you say, okay, you know what, I don't have the answer now, but I'll give you the answer in 10 days, that actually greatly reduces the anxiety. And so that helps in people taking ownership.
Yeah, totally. I think communication is key. That's like good words to
Absolutely.